All right, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us again this week for our weekly mastermind session. So this week I've got Mike Lysacki, our CTO here at LMN. I've been out on the road doing many two-day mastermind workshops lately, and everywhere I go, everybody's always asking where Mike is. How's Mike? I think from all those years of teaching workshops and working alongside contractors, he's always the top request. So here he is, live in the flesh. He's going to give us a good overview today about how to really unlock the efficiency using the CREW app. So we're gonna roll through a few scenarios. Definitely give everybody an opportunity to do some Q&A with Mike. As we go through the workshop, or sorry, the webinar here today, feel free just to add your questions into the chat. I'll be here to kind of moderate and prompt Mike with those questions as they come in. We'll try to touch on those as we go, so please feel free to get those questions into the chat as we go through the content, because we probably won't have a lot of time at the end to get to questions, so we'll prefer to do those along the way. Many of you have had an opportunity to come out and join me at the two-day sessions that we've been holding around the country. And one thing that we're really sort of focused on while doing that is this continuous improvement cycle. And so sitting right in the middle of that continuous improvement cycle is your mission as a company. And then what we're doing in these two-day workshops is really establishing some really good goals, creating some strategy to unlock the true potential of the company, and then looking at what we need to measure and how we're going to sort of review those results to drive more and more improvements in the company. And so what we're going to talk about today ties into this continuous improvement cycle very closely. What we're really talking about are CREW goals, which is, you know, kind of where the rubber meets the road in our businesses. We can be fantastic at estimating, but if we're not great at execution of the work and managing the execution of the work, then I think we all know we still fail. Despite the fact that maybe the price is right and the estimate philosophy is solid, we have to also be good at making sure that crews understand exactly what their goals are and what the desired outcomes are for their crew as they perform the work each day. And then we want to really do that in a way where they can test their strategies, measure for themselves how things are performing, and then drive further improvement based on the results that they're seeing, whether they're good or bad. And so we really built the CREW app with this in mind. When we decided to build a field app way back, it was really so that the crews that were working in my own landscape company became really sort of hyper aware of what the goal for their crew was as it pertained to a specific contract or project. And so we always wanted to make sure that estimated versus actual hours were very clear. And we wanted to make sure that on an ongoing basis, they could see how they were trending on estimated versus actual hours, so that they could sort of almost allow for, you know, input on the fly from others, or, you know, even operate without a lot of input. And estimated versus actual hours is kind of the guide there, in the sense that if a field crew supervisor is feeling like they're running out of hours, they'll reach out for input from an owner or a manager. And on the flip side, if everything's going well, then they've got that comfort in knowing that they're on plan for their job. And so what we're going to talk about today is just how to use the app to really run this cycle more efficiently at the crew level, from setting goals, identifying desired outcomes, refining strategy, understanding what the key metric is, in this case, estimated versus actual hours, and then how to use those results to drive further improvements. So I'll let Mike take it from here. And as I said, feel free to throw some questions in as we go.
All right, thanks, Mark. Yeah, as Mark said, oftentimes when Mark talks about this, or perhaps even if you came to even my old workshops years ago, we sort of talked about this at the company level. But it's important to remember too, every single job is an opportunity to let this play out. And the title says it all. It's a continuous improvement cycle. And so every single job is an opportunity for us to look at how we're doing things and what things we might be doing not the most efficiently. And it could be estimating, and it could be job execution, and it could be communication of information. But it's about looking at that, finding those little gaps, solving those gaps, and by the end of the year, being a lot better than we were at the beginning of the year. And better means results, but better also means people being plugged in, better just communicating overall. So there's tons of opportunity there. And as Mark said, the Crew app is our way of bringing that to the field in a way that's as easy or as approachable as possible. And this sentence kind of says what we were trying to do. We wanted to almost automatically guide success for the crews on everything they do, from the time they log in to the time they log out at the end of the day. And let's go through that Crew app now. Before we get to the Crew app, though, we'll start with the first part of that diagram, which is setting the goals or desired outcome. And that is truly why you're estimating the way you're estimating. So there are certainly easier ways to come up with a price, like unit pricing or square foot pricing, or take a cost and multiply it by 3. But by building in an estimate that's got labor, equipment, materials, you're really solving the two biggest things that you need to do at the estimate level to be profitable. And there's lots of things we need to do, but the two biggest ones are price the job right and give your operations team, and I'll expand it beyond crew just for a second there, but your whole operations team, the information they need to do the work without you, or to do the work that you envisioned without needing you at every step of the way. So that means, how long do I have to take? What equipment do I need? What materials do I need to get this done? And how much of those materials, and what color are they, and what size are they? And then when they have that information, operations can order the materials correctly. Crews can manage their days correctly. They can schedule it correctly. Crews can manage their days correctly. They know what equipment to bring. They know what materials to expect. They can help identify, hey, the color says this, but we got this before it goes on the ground. And then even on the back end of the job, and the reason we say all of operations is because then finance can look at, well, this is what was supposed to happen, and this is what actually happened. And hey, these are the things that we're consistently missing on, so that, again, we keep that cycle going. So it really empowers not just the crews, but certainly the Crew app is going to be the central piece of getting that information from the office about what we saw happen on the job, and then back to the office on what happened, so that we can look at it and make adjustments. And then one of the most important things of the Crew app, and one of the things I think, Mark, we struggled with at the beginning before we had an app, was like aligning job costing and payroll, right? Like one of the most important things to manage, the most important thing to manage, is labor hours, and because it has the biggest impact on variability. And trying to figure out how many hours we paid the crews for, and how many hours we estimated on jobs, and how many hours we actually took on jobs, getting that aligned was tricky. Until we said, okay, time tracking and job costing are going to be the same. They're going to be the same system. We were going to allocate all our time tracking to something. And that means more than just jobs. It could be loading and driving and all, equipment maintenance and safety training and all the things that we do. But the important part is, now we know what we're spending on all those things, and how long we're spending on them, and which crews are spending more and which crews are spending less. We want to do it in a way that everybody's aligned here. Crews use the app. Why? Because their most important objective is to get paid. As a company, our most important objective, coincidentally, is also to get paid by different people, but it's also to get paid. And so we want to bring these two things together in a way that A, facilitates the crews getting paid, but B, also facilitates the company getting paid. We want to invoice for the work we did, but we also want to do it in a way where we can identify where there are gaps and areas for improvements. This is about job costing, and then go make those fixes. So we're going to start with the strategy. And at the crew level, or even job level, the strategy starts with the schedule. And so that's when the crews log into the app, the first thing they're going to see. They're going to see which schedule they're working on. Now they can also clock into routes, and they can clock into jobs individually. But ideally, we have a schedule for them so that they can follow that. It covers where they're going that day, in the order that they're going to it, what tasks they're going to do when they get there, how long those tasks should take. And then if they can tap on any of those scheduled events, excuse me, they can see instructions about what they need to do that day. They can look at things like job files that give them more information. We'll touch on that in a second. They can even tap the history button to see the work that was performed there in the past. That may help them know that, okay, this job's ready for me to go to, or even sometimes the opposite. Hey, I can't go to this job because something's happened there, like a chemical application. The next part of the strategy is assuming they get to the job correctly. Now, how do we communicate to them how to perform the task while we minimize the opportunity for mistakes or rework or missing a customer request or all that kind of stuff? So instructions are going to come up as soon as they tap into the job. Those instructions you should be using to make sure that any of the information that was communicated from the customer, probably right back to the point of sale, all the way through to maybe somebody else who was looking at the job and came up with a way of doing it. We used to have a term for something we used to do on jobs called value engineering. Sometimes you can't put your best foreman on every job, but we used to look in the evenings even at some of the jobs we were about to do with our best foreman and look at, okay, what's the best way to attack this? And even though that foreman wasn't going to do the job, that information is one of the things that we used to pass off in the instructions. Sort of, maybe it's an order of operations. Maybe it's how we're going to manifest access. Maybe it's a particular piece of equipment we're going to use to get this done quickly, or a tool that we want to make sure that they have on their site. Those things would go in there, as well as any of the notes that we picked up at the estimate side. So when Mark would converse with a customer about something and that customer had a special request, a little bit outside the norm especially, that would go in there as well. It could go in right in the crew notes at the estimate level, so that when it came to the job, we didn't have to worry about remembering that. It just flowed all the way through. And then we didn't have to worry that our crews weren't aware of that, because every single time they clock in, no matter who clocks in, no matter if it's the person we thought was going and now they were sick today and somebody else is going, they're going to get those instructions. The other side of those instructions, we use job files for. So files are an important part of getting it done. It helps the crews visualize what they need to do. So files could be anything from, it's a great place to upload photos. You can see a simple example there, but an example nonetheless of an overhead map of a site and instructions. This was particularly handy in maintenance, in snow, where we could communicate to the crews with a picture of what to do and even show them on that what to do. But you could also use files and photos for all kinds of other things. It could be CAD drawings or splices of CAD drawings, so blown up specifications. Could be lists of materials. Could be a manual if you're going to install an irrigation controller or something that you're not used to work with. Put the manual in there. The crews have that information on site. And then, of course, as we talked about earlier, we can get to the job history. Anything to add there, Mark, in terms of other things that you remember we used that were extremely beneficial?
Yeah, no, I think you covered it there. I think that was a pretty good description.
All right. So then they've got the information. They know where to go. They know what to do. They know how long they have to do it. And they've got the information that might help them show how to do it. So we've taken care of most of the who, what, when, where, and whys, so that crews can independently execute that work, A, on time, but B, and just as importantly almost, with minimal hand-holding, supervision, site visits, all the stuff that typically goes along with making sure a job gets done right. So then next up, when they're done the job, we want to measure, and this is continuing around that cycle that we looked at on the first slide, we want to measure what happened so that eventually we can look at how to improve. And so measuring includes things like on maintenance work, ticking off what services we completed or skipped. On some of those services, we may want to track things like materials and how much we used. Those materials could be things like materials from inventory or materials that are used for billing, things that are harder to track from just vendor bills. So that's a great spot to make sure that kind of stuff is tracked there, but especially anything that needs to be billed. We can also, though, here prompt the crews to track things for job costing, like equipment that they've used. so that it's easy for them to mark off, I use this for the day, I use this for the day, I use this for 2 hours if you're going to be on a maintenance or snow thing. And then that way we get that information too, directly from the crews without someone having to do that afterwards.
Hey, Mike, just while you're on this, there was a good question from Katie. Can the daily and task instructions be edited and updated from a cell phone?
From the cell phone, like would the crews can update their notes from the instruction side, from a tablet. So on the instruction side, you're typically setting the job up either on your laptop or your tablet. That's where your sort of admin is going to go. That's where we manage all the jobs. So can you do it remotely? If that's the question, sure, but recommend you have a tablet. You can do it on a phone, just to be clear. You can do it. It's a smaller screen. But it's not in the app. So the crews don't change the instructions. This is the point I just wanted to make sure I drove home or was clear on. The crews don't change the daily instructions. The office changes the daily instructions. If the crew has something they want to add to those instructions, that's fine. They can put a note in, but it would ultimately be up to somebody at the office level, somebody who has permission to edit jobs, to be able to make sure that those instructions are A, valid, B, that we've figured out, for example, how to bill for them and that they truly are part of the scope of the job. And then C, we'll put those in the instructions if it is something necessary. That's clear. All right. So not only can I track the services, the materials, the equipment, for example, and then ultimately also have that stuff automatically generate invoicing, but then we can also do job costing and then stuff like we just talked about, entering notes, taking photos, stuff that might not be exactly related to invoicing or job costing, but is nonetheless still important for us to understand. Here's a quick example, like the photo side of it. Amazing for job verification in snow. That combined with the portal, the idea that the customer can go in and see where we've been that night and see before and after pictures, was incredible for verification, incredible for trust and transparent relationship with the customer, but also incredible when it got time to get paid, because there was very few questions about our invoices ever, because we were so accountable for it. Same went for our time and materials jobs. Mark can attest, as we grew the company into the latter stages and really got into some larger jobs, a lot of those jobs that the hard bidding pricing kind of fell by the wayside as the jobs were so dynamic and the customers were so, I don't want to say demanding, but they were so custom. So we did a lot of time and material work. Well, our time and material invoices, we rarely had to wait, especially compared to other contractors, because our documentation of everything we did, our evidence of things through notes and photos was impeccable. And it also got us out of a big insurance claim one time on the design build side. So you might be like, yeah, well, sounds good for snow. But even on the design build side, we had a story of a crew lead who felt a little bit unsure about the specs of the work they were performing, but we were performing it to the exact specifications of the product, and even called out a product rep to come look at it. Nonetheless, he was taking pictures every day because he didn't feel confident. And sure enough, there was an issue. And sure enough, well, the documentation of our photos completely exonerated our crews from any wrongdoing or ignorance or anything like that. It can be handy for so many uses.
Hey, Mike.
Also have another customer who says it's the best marketing tool they have. They share their garden pictures and their what's going on in the garden and what plants are coming up in bloom and what insects and animals they could expect to attract at that time of year, so that they bring their clients into what's happening in their garden. You've got people excited about their properties. It's a big hobby. You know, people are interested in it. Captivate that interest, and not many contractors are doing that kind of thing. Sorry, Mark.
Yeah, no, just a couple of questions here before we move past this screen. So Dan was asking, is there a way to have equipment and materials default to being tracked automatically on a job?
You can set up default quantities. So the crews are still going to choose, like, yes, the crews are going to choose that I use this material. All those things have a default quantity attached to it. So as soon as I click that thing, it can prompt them with the default quantity. We still need the crews, though, to say, hey, I did this, rather than it automatically saying I did this. The latter one is more prone to billing errors. I mean, technically it's possible. It will absolutely default the quantity for you, but the crews will have to choose what they did that day.
Good. Another question from Brendan. Are there plans to launch a native iPad app rather than an upscaled iPhone version?
Yes, Brendan, one of the things that just takes more time, the Crew app is brand new. And so 100%. And the design team is actually working now with some of the developers on bringing it up to speed on the iPad. And it's not an immense amount of work, but there is more work involving and rescaling everything for it. But yes, is the short answer to the question.
Approximate timeline there, Mike? We won't.
Can I get back to you on that? I'm going to say end of Q1 next year would be my best guess.
Yeah, just approximate. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. And so for everybody out there, it works on the iPads. It's just not scaled natively to the iPad, meaning we can take better advantage of the screen real estate available on the iPad by dynamically resizing and reshaping all the screens to be configured for an iPad screen. So it does work on an iPad, but to be really great on an iPad or to have the best experience you can possibly have on an iPad, you go through your screens and you resize them.
We just had a follow-up question from Landa asking, noting that I think he is asking if the default can be set to track instead of adding them all manually on every job. And so I think we wouldn't recommend doing that, no, because then you're not really job costing at that point. You're just automatically putting what was in the estimate into the job, which wouldn't be tracking at all. So no, we don't do that or recommend doing that or plan to make that possible.
Yeah, we want to. There are things we can do to make things easier, but oftentimes those things also make things lazier and less accurate, if that makes any sense. And so it is important to get real information. And the more we do, in theory, it makes things simpler, but it definitely makes things less accurate. All right, so moving through, now we've captured some information that can go to drive job costing, that can drive billing. And as we talked about with photos, and we can get all kinds of other advantages out of it. But now we want to look at how do we improve? So again, continuing around that cycle that we looked at the beginning, we want to look now at the results. And we want to look at them through two lenses. The first lens is the field staff lens. Like they need to know what they want to do or what they should be doing to do better. And we don't need to sit down and crunch a whole bunch of reports and figure out a whole bunch of information and give it to them. We can actually give it to them right there in the moment and when it's most effective, which is right at the beginning and then the end of every single job. And so that's what happens as well. When the crews clock out of the Crew app, they're going to see how much time was estimated. They're going to see how much time they're used. They're going to get a little note saying, hey, things went well, or hey, things didn't go well. And when then things don't go well, and they won't all go well, that's what Mark was referring to earlier. That's what starts those crucial conversations on what's working and what's not. It may be an issue with the crew. It may be an issue with the estimate. It may be an issue with something just got missed or misunderstood, but it's so important and it's so good for culture to do what's happening here. Number one, you're telling your crews it's important to get stuff done on time. And it is. There's arguably nothing more important than getting profitable on this job than getting it done on time. Even almost more than pricing. You probably aren't in business if you can't price work at all accurately. So assuming that you're somewhat accurate, even if it's not perfect, the most important thing you can do is get that job done on time. And then to do that without telling the crews how long they should take or how long they have been taking, then it's almost impossible or inconceivable that you're ever going to get alignment there. And so we want to tell the crews this is how long we think it should take. And then they want to execute it. And they should want to know, good people should definitely want to know, am I doing a good job? And if you've got people that maybe don't ask themselves that question, they might not be the right people. When you have people that do good work, they almost inevitably want to know they're doing good work. And then most importantly, they want the owner or their manager to know that they're doing good work. That's what makes good people feel good about doing their job every day. And so the fact that you have that in the system means you're going to get more out of those staff, means you're going to attract those kind of staff. And over a couple of years, you'll change the culture of your company, because more and more of those staff will come, more of the other ones will fall off by the wayside, and eventually you get a team of really hardworking, driven people. Mark can attest, we used to show this in the job interview. And as he mentioned, like way back, it was just it wasn't even an app. It was like a website, because we had Blackberries and they didn't have apps, and it was black and white and all this kind of stuff. But nonetheless, we used to show people in job interviews, crew leads, this is what we do on jobs. This is what you're going to see. This is how you're going to know where to go. And that evolved over time into what you're seeing here. But it was really important right off the bat to set that culture. And then you could tell right away whether people were excited about that or not. And that excitement that we had that level of tracking was a good indicator for us that we had a good potential staff member here. The right-hand side of this screen is something that we're just launching right now. In fact, last night you would have seen it go out in the web app, and you may not have even seen it yet. But if you jump onto your timesheets in the web app as of last night, you'll see a brand new score for every timesheet. It's called your crew score. And what your crew score is measuring is the time that they spend that day or that timesheet on productive work, which is like job work, revenue producing work, versus the time they spend on jobs that they classify as unproductive. And that could be driving, shop maintenance, and loading and unloading, vendor pickups, all that kind of non-revenue generating work. So you can now go into your staff screen. You can set goals for each foreman, because a maintenance foreman is going to have less billable work than a design foreman, assuming they're driving around all day. And then we'll be able to measure their score each and every day. So they're going to get feedback on their job. They're also going to get feedback every single day about how did I do. Now, the Crew app one comes out next week. So it'll actually be live in the app next week. It's just finalizing testing and Apple reviews and all that kind of stuff. You'll see it in the web app already, and it'll be launched for the crews next week. So some exciting stuff there in terms of daily crew productivity. Then moving on, now we can take that information. We can automate invoicing. So we're going to track everything the crews do. And then what's billable, which is set up at the job, the crews don't even have to think about it. It'll automatically invoice, whether it's monthly or hourly or per service or bill for material. So that takes part of that. Now we get paid for everything we do. And the crews are getting paid for the hours they work, because that's what the Crew app is all about as well. So now I can see for everybody's hours where they got spent. Every single minute is accountable. It's easy to review and approve on here. And then we can export that to either QuickBooks or a payroll provider like Paychex, ADP, or anything like that. And now we know we're paying our staff, and we're there. All those hours are accountable for somewhere. And then the biggest part of that graph is like, or arguably the most important part. Now, what are we doing well? What are we not doing well? And how do we improve? And as I mentioned here, up at the top here, you're going to see that new panel that we launched last night for every single timesheet. So one thing on the timesheet is how productive, how much time did that crew spend generating revenue? Another is job costing. How profitable are we doing on the job? What's our estimated versus actual hours? What's our estimated versus actual wage costs, equipment, materials, all those important things. And then also our analytics screens that roll up multiple jobs, so we can look at how profitable are we for a particular route, or for a particular crew lead, or for a particular division. So we can slice and dice and combine all those job costing reports into bigger reports that help show us trends of things that are working and not. And why this matters? We've talked about this a few times. Certainly anyone who was at one of my old workshops will remember this. Like every single day, if we lose a day on it, if you have a 5-day job and that job takes 6 days, the cost of that extra day is shocking to most, right? There's the payroll, there's the equipment, there's the overhead that all got unrecovered on that 6th day. And that has actual costs on an average 3-person crew of a little over $2,000. But then that crew didn't earn any revenue that day either, because you estimated 5 days and the crew took 6. So we lost a whole day of potential revenue generation. So now we're talking almost a minimum cost of about $6,000 a day in lost opportunity. And then when you think, yeah, that happens like 10, 15 times a year, now we're into $60,000 to $80,000 of unrecovered costs each year, just because things are not going the way we expected them to. So the Crew app, I might argue, will make a biggest difference in capturing that revenue than anything else as part of LMN, whether it's efficient routing or planning and loading or reducing work because of mistakes. maximizing our revenue producing time, saving time running payroll, eliminating missed billing, which is a massive one, approving estimate versus actual performance by giving crews those goals and then giving them the constant feedback they need to improve on those, making strategic decisions at the continuous improvement level by across all our jobs, or even just reducing risk and liability. There are so many ways that CREW app will help us become more efficient or earn more revenue. It would be crazy not to. Mark, before we get into the final slides, any other questions come in or anything you want to add to those?
We've got some really good, very specific questions about how to use the app and whatnot. I think, for today, we weren't really getting into the how-to of the app. We were kind of trying to highlight the impact that it has on the business. If you do need any help, we have training available. You can book with your account managers to do some one-to-one training. And then also we have live virtual training, and we have pre-recorded training on how to use the app. So definitely, if we haven't gotten to any really specific questions, we've tried to do our best answering in the chat here. Some of them are more technical how-tos. Please feel free. We're always here to help you get the most out of the tools. And if you've got ideas on how to make things better, we want to hear those ideas. Your account managers record every one of those ideas, and our product team reviews every suggestion every week. So please keep those coming in. I see there's some great ones here in the chat. Couple questions that we could cover though, Mike. Can you add videos to the app, or is it just pictures?
The files will actually support videos. It's up to a certain amount. I think the maximum size is like 50 meg. So as long as the videos are less than 50 meg, you can do that. You can also put links though on jobs. So if you want to link to a longer video, you can do that. So you don't even, if you won't necessarily upload the whole video to that thing. It takes them a while to download it, but you could link it to something that you stream on a YouTube channel or any video hosting tool.
Katie was asking here, does this send a report in for weekly hours for the staff, start time, end time per day? Do you want to kind of highlight how the reporting happens there, Mike?
Yeah, 100%. So it doesn't necessarily send a report in at the end of a week. That report's coming in constantly. So you'll actually see that, Katie, in real time. Every single